On the skeleton coast, a jeep sat unbroken in the sand, doors unlocked, fuel half full, food untouched. Footprints stretched across the salt pan for less than 200 meters, then stopped, as if erased by an invisible hand. No storm touched that day. No animal signs marked the earth. What began as an ordinary tourist journey into Namibia's desert became a void written into police ledgers. Investigators returned again and again, drawing circles around the same unanswerable gaps. The salt pan gave nothing back. What remains is not a solution, but an absence measured in footsteps that end mid-stride. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The skeleton coast carried silence like a wound. At 6 p.m., under fading light, a jeep stood alone on the salt pan edge, its doors hung unlocked, windows intact, tires unpunctured. The engine block had cooled but showed no fault. Inside, a half-empty water bottle stood upright in the cup holder. A sealed pack of crackers lay unopened. The fuel gauge pointed just below half. The odometer confirmed a long drive north from Swakopmund. Nothing suggested struggle. Nothing suggested haste. It was Jonas Müller, a wildlife guide returning from a coastal trek, who first saw it. He approached slowly, expecting a stranded tourist, but the air around the vehicle held stillness. No radio chatter, no human presence. A notebook sat on the passenger seat, its cover clean, unmarked. In the back, a rolled sleeping bag rested against the rear window, never unfastened. Jonas called authorities, voice low, as if the air itself might break. Inspector Daniel Okoro arrived with 2 constables before night pressed down. Their torches cut across flat earth, beams tight and cold. Okoro noted the jeep's ignition bore no tampering. The rental plate confirmed identity, Clara Weiss. 32, a tourist from Munich. Paperwork matched, wallet inside, passport intact, local currency untouched. Nothing stolen, no violence, only absence. Then they saw the footprints. In the sand, pressed clear as if moments old. Tracks led away from the jeep, light-soled hiking boots, average stride. The pattern suggested steady pace, not panic. Okoro followed them with measured steps. Torch beams steady. The trail held for nearly 200 meters, across crusted salt and pale grit. Then, abruptly, the ground fell silent. The last print ended cleanly mid-sequence, heel sharp, toe partial. Beyond it, nothing. No scuff, no drag, no disturbance. Okoro crouched, gloved fingers brushing the salt surface. It had hardened under dry heat, no storm sweeping it clean. The line of tracks stopped without explanation, like a sentence cut in half. Jonas shifted, uneasy. Constables muttered of wind, but the inspector shook his head. The weather log that day showed no event. Satellites confirmed. Whatever removed the prints was not natural. They circled outward, flashlights casting long arcs. Beyond the terminal footprint stretched unbroken surface, white and empty. No marks of tire, no paw, no talon. The salt pan gave nothing back. Back at the jeep, Okoro ordered cataloging, photographs of every angle, latent prints dusted from door handles, soil samples taken near the final step, items bagged and tagged, map folded on the dashboard, rental agreement in glove compartment, a green scarf on the back seat, everything ordinary, everything intact. The desert, however, offered only one artifact of presence, a chain of steps that ended without reason. By midnight, the site stood frozen under taped perimeter. The jeep looked less abandoned than staged, untouched in the vastness, Officers exchanged clipped phrases. Jonas left, shaken, refusing to guide the next day. Okoro stood longer, staring at the horizon line, at the way the earth swallowed evidence whole. The skeleton coast held its silence. The footprint still pressed half into the saltpan. The desert recorded her last step, and nothing after. The following morning, light poured thin across the skeleton coast. Inspector Daniel Okoro drove inland, carrying Clara Weiss's rental documents and her passport toward Swakopmund. The route was unbroken gravel, dunes shifting faintly under wind. Nothing in the vehicle suggested she had planned to abandon it. The food remained sealed. The map unfolded only to one section, its crease bent toward the northern edge. At the desert hut shelter, halfway along the route. Okoro checked the visitor logs. The book lay on a wooden table inside, pages filled with names and dates in uneven handwriting, hikers, birdwatchers, travelers. The page dated 2 days prior showed 3 names scrawled in ink, each marked with arrival and departure. The following day, blank. Clara's name should have appeared, yet no entry bore it. The line remained empty, as if she had never passed through. The hut itself showed faint traces of her presence. A receipt from a Swakopmund grocery store lay folded in the corner bin. Time-stamped 9:45 a.m., items listed bottled water, dried fruit, 2 packets of crackers. Clara's bank card number matched the copy stored in her wallet. The purchase was hers. She had been alive, present, moving north. Yet the log refused her entry. Back in town, Okoro met with the rental office. Staff recalled her briefly a German tourist. Polite, reserved, paying by credit. She signed paperwork without hesitation. The clerk described her attire: khaki jacket, light trousers, hair tied back, ordinary, unremarkable. The rental contract confirmed her name and Munich address. No anomalies. Clara's brother arrived 1 week later. Martin Weiss, 35, dark hair cropped short, a civil engineer by trade. He carried copies of her itinerary and a small folder of family photographs. His face showed restraint, yet his hands never stilled. He pressed authorities for detail, demanding every record. He insisted Clara was meticulous, never careless, never one to step unplanned into the desert. In Okoro's office, Martin examined the evidence bagged from the jeep: wallet, passport, scarf, map. His eyes lingered on the scarf, a plain green wool piece, familiar to him from childhood. He held it briefly, then placed it back with care. Among Clara's possessions was also her notebook. The pages contained sketches of dunes, fragments of travel notes, lists of bird species. The final entry dated 3 days before her disappearance, describing sunrise along the coast. Nothing after, no sign of distress, no mention of company. The police photographs disturbed Martin most. The footprints extended outward, crisp under fading light. Then, without warning, the trail ceased. He looked at the final print for long minutes, lips pressed tight. Later that evening, Okoro returned to the hut with his constables. He walked the perimeter again, flashlight sweeping across cracked boards and stone hearth. On the table, a fresh sheet of paper bore 3 lines Jonas Muller's signature. Another guide, a tourist couple, still no Clara. The omission stood sharp. Forensic technicians analyzed the hut log. Graphite composition matched local pencils, no erasures visible, no chemical wash detected. The space was not blank from removal, it was blank from never having been filled. The desert permitted her presence through receipts, through photographs, through the jeep's odometer, but at the hut where every traveler signed her name dissolved into nothing. By midnight, Okoro filed his report, timeline intact, records catalogued. Clara Weiss departed Swakopmund, drove north, bought supplies, reached the skeleton coast, left her vehicle, walked across the saltpan, and then void. Martin returned to his hotel, carrying the map found in her jeep. In his room, he unfolded it across the desk. The last page bent sharply toward the saltpan, crease deep from repeated folding. His eyes traced the line of desert that had taken her, a stretch of pale ink that mirrored the horizon outside his window. In the silence, the map looked less like guidance and more like a record of disappearance. The crease pointed north, toward nothing. Search operations began at dawn. Inspector Daniel Okoro oversaw deployment of local constables, supported by 2 helicopters hired from Windhoek. Volunteer guides from Swakopmund arrived with their own vehicles, joining the grid. The desert, usually devoid of human movement, now held lines of men walking parallel, their spacing measured by rope and signal flags. The first forensic anchor was laid wooden stakes marking the start point at the jeep, numbered sequentially across the saltpan. Each footprint of Clara Weiss was photographed, measured and plotted. The trail showed no irregularity, her stride consistent, length precise, suggesting calm advance. The sequence ended, mid-step, with no natural interruption. Helicopters hovered low, blades scattering loose grit. From above, surveyors scanned for disturbances, drag marks, dislodged stones, indentations. Cameras captured wide swaths. Later, compared against satellite imagery, nothing extended beyond the footprint termination. Ground teams expanded their radius. They swept east toward dune ridges, west toward the ocean. Samples of salt crust were bagged and labeled. Analysts later confirmed the surface showed no secondary compression, no signs of burial beneath the crust. Soil remained undisturbed for months. By noon, Okoro ordered a line search. Officers advanced shoulder to shoulder, scanning each meter. They recovered only a single item, a plastic water bottle half buried near the footprint's edge, cap intact. Faint smear of fingerprints detected. Lab confirmed only Clara's prints. No others. Contents half consumed. The bottle's purchase label matched the same Swakopmund receipt found earlier. It was hers. Dogs were flown in from Windhoek by late afternoon, trained in scent tracking. They were set upon the footprint line, noses lowered, tails stiff. They advanced steadily, then stopped precisely where the tracks ended. The animals circled, confused, before sitting back, handlers tugging leashes in vain. The scent line died with the footprints. Okoro studied the behavior with arms folded. Nature allowed continuation of trace. Here, it ended. The desert seemed to erase forward motion deliberately. Search expanded through nightfall. Floodlights illuminated the saltpan, beams casting harsh shadows. Drones swept overhead, thermal sensors searching for heat. The desert yielded only cold. Volunteers murmured about mirages, about storms swallowing signs, yet weather logs, pulled from meteorological stations, confirmed steady conditions, no wind greater than 3 kilometers per hour, no rainfall, no seismic disturbance. The environment held stillness. Yet within that stillness, Clara disappeared. Forensic technicians compared satellite photos from before and after the disappearance. The pan's surface remained unchanged. No vehicle tracks approached, no aerial disturbance from aircraft noted. Nothing entered or exited. By the 3rd day, Fatigue thinned the search. Jonas Mueller returned briefly, his eyes shadowed, claiming the site felt cursed. Other guides followed reluctantly, muttering of desert spirits, of trails that ended in nothing. Okoro wrote his third report, jeep intact, footprints measured, photographed, bottle recovered, prints confirmed, dogs lost scent, area radius 10 kilometers cleared, negative result. Martin Weiss received the update with stiff silence. He pressed for expanded aerial sweeps, for international assistance. His request was noted, deferred. On the saltpan's surface, the numbered stakes still stood, from 1 to 39, each held a photograph. Beyond number 40, nothing. The line stopped, pointing into void. At sunset, Okoro remained crouched near stake 40, his gloved hand tracing the edge of the final print. The impression preserved a heel, a partial toe, pressed firmly, no stagger, no collapse. A step begun, but never finished. The desert presented this artifact coldly, as if mocking explanation. The last footprint stared upward, sharp against the crust. And after it, silence. The search radius expanded the following morning. Inspector Okoro, now operating under official directive from Windhoek's Regional Command, authorized the inclusion of aerial LiDAR scans and thermal infrared sweeps. The saltpan remained the epicenter, but new sectors were added east toward the inland gravel flats, west toward the rusting hulls of shipwrecks stranded decades ago. Constables began with the dunes. Each team was issued a GPS device, survey flags, and log sheets. Every set of tire tracks was photographed, documented, and cross-referenced against known traffic reports. Most belonged to tourist shuttles, some to coast patrols, but one faint pair partially overlain by recent wind patterns was undocumented. The tire tracks ran parallel to Clara Weiss's original direction of travel, then veered sharply toward the wreck of the Otavi, a skeletal merchant vessel left corroding on the sand since the 1940s. No fresh footprints accompanied them. No vehicle was recovered. Forensic anchor castings of the tread revealed a deep lug off-road pattern, likely from a commercial-grade truck or retrofitted Land Rover. Width measurements matched no registered local vehicle in the area that week. Okoro logged it, but command did not authorize further pursuit. South of the saltpan, a drone captured another anomaly, a minor depression in the gravel crust, about 30 meters long, shaped like a tire rut but flaring into nothing. No entrance, no exit. The pattern looked like a line begun and abandoned. Soil compression tests found no weight signature deeper than 3 centimeters, too light for any real transport. Still, the log marked it ridge-like anomaly, negative yield. Meanwhile, Martin Weiss tracked down nearby lodges, hostels, and gas stops. None recalled Clara past the date of her disappearance. Security footage from a desert rest station dated 8:37 a.m., one day before her vehicle was found, showed a woman matching her profile entering the store. She bought bottled water, a travel-sized sunscreen, and 2 chocolate bars. She spoke briefly with the clerk. No one else followed her in. The footage ends with her exiting to the lot, walking out of frame. No one saw her vehicle depart. No one remembered her leaving. A forensic detail surfaced from this timestamp data embedded in the footage showed a 7-minute gap between 8:41 and 8:48 a.m. The feed glitched static, followed by a white screen. The store manager chalked it up to an old hard drive. Okoro ordered a backup pulled. It had been overwritten. Forensic anchor surveillance failure log from the security system marked the interruption as unauthorized termination. That phrase wasn't part of the store's software lexicon. The manufacturer denied such a tag existed. Late afternoon, dogs were deployed again, this time toward the wreck fields. They picked up nothing but bone dust and seal carcasses. One K9 handler, a Namibian ranger named Joseph Abenzi, noted a subtle change in the terrain near the Otavi. A patch of salt had fractured differently patterned, not random. Cracks formed a square. Soil below had been compacted, then exposed. Investigators dug 20 centimeters. Nothing. No fibers, no bones, no trace. But in the logs, the shape was recorded and photographed. One entry read, "Uneven salt fracturing. Potential tampering. Resembles an object previously placed." Back at the field command tent, Okoro reviewed Clara's belongings again. Her notebook had a hand-drawn map, slightly different from the official one. In it, she had marked a line across the pan with a red dot near the Otavi. No explanation, no label. Martin stared at the dot for a long time. "She doesn't draw unless something matters," he said. They overlaid the dot with satellite maps. It aligned within 20 meters with the flared tire rut discovered earlier, the flare that led nowhere. Wind picked up by evening. The saltpan's crust began to shift, surface cracking in new lines. Officers pulled up stakes and flagged their perimeter for safety. Okoro remained behind a few minutes longer, staring out at the wreck in the dark. The Otavi's ribs curled toward the sky like broken fingers. And just beneath them, the gravel still held no trace. Martin Weiss refused to leave. He moved into a modest room above a bait shop in Swakopmund. The window faced east away from the ocean, toward the interior that had swallowed his sister. Each morning he descended early, photocopied maps, marked out wind patterns, read meteorological summaries from the last 2 years. By noon he sat in police archives, combing through cases of other missing persons near the Skeleton Coast. There were 11 in 20 years. Tourists, locals, fishermen. Most explained away drownings, storms, engine failures. But 3 carried the same forensic echo footprints, leading to silence. Forensic anchor, missing person case file, number 447B, dated 2004, a Czech backpacker, Thomas Jelen, vanished 30 kilometers south of Clara's location. His footprints, too, ended cleanly on the pan, no vehicle, no remains, no signal. The file was marked closed due to lack of evidence. Martin compiled these fragments, created a private timeline when he requested access to the cold case files. His appeal was initially denied. It took an intervention from the German consulate to unlock redacted documents. Even then, pages were missing. Some photographs were blurred beyond recovery, file tags corrupted. Back at the station, Okoro handed over Clara's personal items. Most had been released: passport, wallet, sunglasses, camera. The last object to be processed was the Nikon camera recovered from the passenger seat. Martin scrolled through the internal memory, photographs from dunes, coastlines, jackals near the ridges. One image caught his attention. Frame 204. A shot of the salt pan, horizon line perfectly centered, but no subject, just emptiness. Metadata showed it was taken at 3:12 p.m. on the day she disappeared. The GPS tag matched the location where her footprints ended. Clara had stood on the edge of that white desert, aimed her lens, and captured nothing. Martin printed the image, stared at it nightly. To him, it was a message. She knew she was there alone. He told Okoro, "She saw something I don't Later that week, Martin requested access to Clara's emails and cloud storage. Passwords were recovered through embassy assistance. Within her drive, among receipts and travel plans, was a single video file 20 seconds long. It began with sand shifting underfoot. The camera pointed down. Clara's voice could be heard faintly, breathless. "Confused," she said. "I can't see them anymore." Then the screen went black. No other footage followed. Forensic anchor analysis of the video confirmed authenticity. Wind speed calculated from audio-matched weather logs. The phrase was time-stamped at 3:10 p.m., 2 minutes before the final photo was taken. Back in the field, Okoro returned to the pan with new personnel, a quiet ritual now. He walked the line of footprints again, now partially degraded. The saltpan had hardened around the last print, preserving it like a fossil. They marked it with a new stake, metal, not wood, etched with Clara's name. That night, Martin stood by the jeep. It remained unmoved, a rusting capsule of intent, a forensic exhibit open to the elements. He placed a single item on the hood, her green wool scarf, pressed flat. By morning, the scarf had vanished. No wind recorded overnight. No footprints near the vehicle. 2 weeks passed without progress. Martin Weiss filed a formal complaint to the German embassy, citing negligence, suppression of evidence, and procedural failure. In response, the Namibian Ministry of Home Affairs deployed a new investigative liaison, retired military intelligence officer Captain Elias Njoroge. He arrived without ceremony, a tall man with sharp posture, boots that left deep impressions in the gravel. He carried no briefcase, only a notebook bound in red leather. His handshake with Okoro was firm. His questions pointed. Njoroge began not at the saltpan, but at the perimeter roads. He walked them for days, tracing paths no one else had considered. Old tire tracks buried under new ones, depressions in fence lines, crushed brush. He read terrain the way others read text. On the third morning, he called Okoro to a remote spot northeast of the jeep site. A cluster of stones had been disturbed, stacked with unnatural symmetry. Beneath them, a rusted metal canister. Forensic anchor inside the canister were water-stained documents, photocopies of tourist maps, a smuggling manifest dated 2014, and a partial customs clearance form marked with a falsified Swakopmund seal. The form was traced to a defunct freight company, one whose owner had been questioned in an unrelated human trafficking case 5 years earlier. The company had since dissolved. Its vehicles were never recovered. Njoroge's theory unsettled the team. "These disappearances aren't acts of nature," he said quietly. "They're systematic, and they require silence." Martin pushed for more. If Clara had been targeted, why? What had she seen? Njoroge requested Clara's external memory card, one Martin hadn't known existed. It had been logged by police and archived, buried under misfiled property codes. It took 2 days to recover. On the card, ordinary photographs of dunes and rock formations, and one image that froze them all. A vehicle, dark green, partially hidden under a camo tarp, parked beside the Otavi wreck. A man stood beside it face, turned away. A white plastic container lay open at his feet. Metadata taken 2 days before Clara's disappearance. Time-stamped 4:17 p.m., GPS aligned within 30 meters of the final footprint. Forensic anchor image enhancement revealed a military-grade antenna mounted to the vehicle's frame, the type used in encrypted communication systems. The man's figure was analyzed, height approximately 1.8 meters, build lean. Clothing civilian, but the shoes were tactical Vibram soles, not available commercially in Namibia. The photo had never been downloaded. It had remained hidden in the secondary card slot, untouched. Why she didn't report it if she ever realized she captured it remained unknown. Back in the Swakopmund station, Okoro noticed a second anomaly. On the Jeep's exterior, under the rear fender, a faint smear had been documented and dismissed as desert residue upon reanalysis. The substance was not sand, it was wax. Forensic anchor wax composition was traced to a type used in suppressors and firearm maintenance kits, chemically stable under heat, waterproof, military grade. Nothing else on the vehicle suggested violence. No forced entry, no scratches, no defensive wounds on seat surfaces. But now the evidence began to whisper of presence non-random, professional. Martin sat quietly through the findings. His voice was low when he asked the final question. Did she walk into the desert, or was she told to? Outside the station, a local fisherman watched them exit. He approached Okoro later that evening, hesitant. Said he'd heard engines in the early morning hours. 2 days after Clara disappeared, engines where no engines should have been. On the saltpan, no lights, just motion under starlight. He never told anyone, until now. His statement was logged, no one else corroborated. No tracks remained. Captain Elias Njoroge compiled a summary packet, 12 pages, each labeled, cross-referenced, and sealed. The first was a timeline. The last was a photo of Clara Weiss's final footprint. Between them, silence filled with implication. But official channels responded differently. The ministry sent back a single-page memorandum. No confirmed evidence of foul play. Investigation remains classified under tourist disappearance. Case closed pending further discovery. Okoro stared at the letter under flickering station light. No mention of the wax compound, no acknowledgement of the antenna, no reference to the off-register tire tracks or the redacted footage. Martin's appeal to the embassy gained traction briefly, then slowed. Files became harder to access. Requests required signatures that were suddenly unavailable. Documents previously viewed returned with sections blurred, redacted, or missing. Even the metadata logs digitally untouched for months showed edits, dates modified, officer initials removed. Forensic Anchor 1 internal report now ended with a new paragraph. Inserted after initial signature, search efforts concluded. Subject likely perished due to exposure. No further inquiry warranted. But Okoro remembered signing no such line. Njoroge withdrew from the case. His contract was not renewed. His report vanished from the chain. When Martin requested a copy, he was told no such report existed. In frustration, Martin filed a formal complaint with the Namibian Parliamentary Standing Committee on Human Rights. 3 weeks later, his request was declined on grounds of insufficient jurisdiction. By then, the saltpan had begun to change. A seasonal wind shift hardened the surface differently. Crusts cracked and reformed. The final footprint, once sharp and intact, now bore fractures. Tourists passed nearby on guided tours, unaware of the stake driven into the ground beside a rusting vehicle. Forensic Anchor satellite imagery from a commercial service captured something that no government images did. A vehicle parked near the Otavi wreck 1 week after the case was closed. 2 men standing beside it. No markings, no timestamps filed in government logs. Martin paid for the images himself. They were dated, encrypted, and buried in his hard drive under a folder marked Clara Shadow. He reached out to foreign journalists. No responses came. He submitted FOIA requests to South African security services. Denied. The more he pushed, the more obstructions rose. One day he returned to the Swakopmund field station to find Clara's jeep gone. No notice, no relocation order. Forensic anchor. The logbook entry for that date was torn out. The line number skipped. One officer claimed the vehicle was transferred to Windhoek for processing. Another said it was scrapped due to salt corrosion. No chain of custody form was ever produced. The scarf Clara left behind was never seen again. The metal stake marking her final step remained until it didn't. In early March, a tourist posted a photo on a travel blog. The image showed the saltpan under dusk light. No vehicle, no stake, just open desert. Caption haunting place. Nothing here, just wind and salt. Martin wrote in his journal they erased her. Not only her body, but her trace. He remained in Namibia another month, watched the ocean, walked the pan's edge, every now and then. He saw constellations he and Clara used to name as children. The Southern Cross tilted south, unblinking. He never returned to Germany. And in the police archive in Windhoek, the file marked CW18 NAM was reclassified under inactive cases. The folder's contents were thinned, photographs removed, one document left inside. A cropped image of a footprint. No name, no date, no context. Just one line typed beneath. Unresolved. Martin Weiss no longer asked questions in daylight. He worked at night now, seated at a table pushed against the far wall of a guest house in Walvis Bay. The room was clean, silent, anonymous, on the wall. A tourist map had been spread flat and pinned, thin red thread linked points across the Skeleton Coast, disappearances, witness reports, glitches in official logs. He circled 3 sites repeatedly, the saltpan near Clara's final footprint, the Otavi wreck, and a stretch of gravel road 40 kilometers north where a weather station once logged an unexplained signal spike. Forensic Anchor archived electromagnetic frequency report from station V19 dated 3 days after Clara vanished, between 2:42 and 2:49 a.m. The array recorded a burst transmission not aligned to any known satellite. Pattern irregular. Duration 7 minutes. The data was flagged, then archived, never analyzed. Martin pulled the records by accident. While researching signal coverage, the pattern did not match meteorological equipment. The signal was directional, targeted. He printed it, tacked it to the wall. Then he met Lindiwe Marumo, a retired officer from Namibia's anti-poaching unit, now a private investigator. Lindiwe had quietly compiled a list of unusual vanishings. She didn't advertise her findings. She didn't need to. They met over bitter tea in a half-closed cafe. She listened to his story, then opened a faded folder. Inside, notes from a case in 2011. A South African journalist vanished while documenting illegal arms transport through the Namib desert. His last communication mentioned a vehicle similar to the one in Clara's hidden photo. Forensic Anchor, the journalist's last message, was a GPS ping with a single-word watch. It triangulated within 500 meters of Clara's disappearance. Lindiwe slid over a second folder. Surveillance stills from 2016, a vehicle convoy crossing desert terrain under radio silence. No lights, no transponder, cargo unclear. The lead vehicle bore the same antenna mount identified in Clara's photograph. She looked at Martin. "Your sister may have seen more than she understood," she said. They returned to the desert, rented an old utility truck, no guides, no permits, just 2 people navigating coordinates no one wanted to revisit. At 3 p.m., they reached the pan. The jeep was gone, the stake gone. No trace left behind except what Martin carried in his mind. Lindiwe marked locations using a ground-penetrating scanner. Scans revealed one anomaly, a shallow, rectangular cavity beneath the surface crust, roughly the dimensions of a body. Forensic anchor, the cavity measured 170 centimeters by 40, depth 45, no organic remains. Soil compression suggested burial and removal. Beside the site, Lindiwe found a metal fragment half the size of a coin. She cleaned it slowly, exposing a serial number etched into the surface, HK04732N. It didn't match any Namibian registry, but cross-reference with international weapons databases revealed a match to a batch of suppressor mounts produced in Eastern Europe, exported through shell companies. The fragment had no reason to be in a tourist zone. Lindiwe warned Martin, "This isn't a cold case, it's a quiet one." They buried the fragment in a sealed container beside the anomaly, recorded GPS, photographed the sky. Martin said nothing on the way back. That night, Lindiwe's tire was slashed. No alarm triggered, no camera caught it. She left the next morning. Martin remained. He took a room at a remote hostel near the coast. No one asked questions. There, he began to disappear one routine at a time. Stopped emailing home, stopped uploading photos. But in the dark, he still mapped, still followed lines where footsteps vanished, still searched for her in the places maps do not label. The coastal town of Henty's Bay bore no memory of Clara Weiss. Tourists came for fish, stayed for sunsets, and left their prints in sand that washed clean each night, but in the back room of a bar near the fishing pier. Martin Weiss met a man who remembered everything. He called himself Petrus, no last name offered, former mechanic, former customs runner, former something else. His stories changed, but his tone never did. He said he'd seen the green Land Rover before, not once, twice, once near the Otavi and once behind the old manganese depot, 2 days before Clara vanished. Martin leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. Was she inside? Petrus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he set down a folded piece of paper, a receipt, faded and water-stained. Forensic anchor receipt dated 4 days before Clara's disappearance, issued at a fuel depot licensed to supply unmarked operations vehicles, run by a front company now deregistered, paid in cash. Vehicle listed GRNLR 88. Not a license plate, a call sign. Martin traced the ink with a gloved hand. The depot had long closed, but the receipt was real. The carbon bleed on the paper matched those used at that time. Petrus then mentioned something else, a rumor, about a ghost patrol, vehicles moving across salt flats at night, lights off, no plate numbers. He said the locals called them the Watchers. He didn't know if they were government. He didn't know if they were worse. Just that when you see tire tracks without headlights. You go the other way. Later that week, Martin visited a tavern near the highway turnoff. Inside, nailed above the bar, was a lost and found board cluttered with junk watches, sunglasses, a child's sandal. And in the corner, a torn piece of green wool, forensic anchor. Martin compared it to a fiber from Clara's scarf. He kept 2 threads in a sealed pouch. Under magnification, the weave matched, wool count identical, dyed using the same German manufacturer. Someone had torn it off, left it here, or someone had picked it up and pinned it, not knowing. He asked the bartender. The man shrugged. Been there for years, he said. Martin stared at the board for a long time. At the edge of the coastal fog, A pattern emerged. The missing all had one thing in common: travel alone. Solo drivers, few relatives, sparse documentation. The ones with families that pushed got closed files. Those without simply vanished. Forensic anchor Martin compiled 11 cases across each. The evidence chain broke at the same 3 points: final GPS ping, final physical footprint, and final third-party witness. Clara's disappearance was not an exception. It was a template. Back in Walvis Bay, Martin scanned old customs logs. One name appeared 3 times: Elias K., listed as an escort liaison on 3 shadow shipments from 2015 to 2017. It was the same handwriting as the falsified customs form found near the saltpan. Elias Njoroge. Martin tried to contact him. No answer. A week later, he received a brown envelope slipped under his guest house door. No name, no stamp. Inside, one photograph. Black and white satellite view. A body-shaped object on the saltpan. Date stamped March 2018, 5 days after Clara disappeared. The coordinates identical to the rectangular soil cavity he and Lindiwe had discovered. But the image had never been logged. Never filed. Never seen. He turned the photo over. Written in pencil, only what the salt remembers. Martin Weiss left Walvis Bay in silence. No forwarding address, no calls, no emails. He drove a rented bakkie into the northern gravel flats alone. No companion this time. No tracker. Only a topographical map, a field radio, a forensic sampling kit, and the satellite photo folded tightly in his breast pocket. He parked 40 kilometers past the last cell tower ping. The saltpan stretched ahead, bone white under cloudless sky. The landscape was featureless, but his mind carried every marker. He walked the final stretch on foot, GPS in hand, step by step. The cavity he and Lindiwe had scanned was gone. Wind had filled it, time had packed it, but Martin's steps led true. He stopped, looked down. Nothing visible, just crusted white grit. He kneeled. Gloved hands scraped softly at the surface. After 6 minutes of digging, his fingertips struck texture. Canvas. Forensic anchor he excavated 12 centimeters before unearthing the corner of an olive-green tarp, standard military issue. Faded but intact. No label, no serial. Under it, plastic wrapping, degraded and tight. He stopped. Took a photograph, marked coordinates, recovered soil samples, then reburied it. There were no bones, no scent, but he knew what this place had once held. He set a marker stone, didn't label it, didn't draw attention. He turned and left. That night, back in Swakopmund, Martin plugged his external drive into a secured terminal. Loaded a folder titled CW Sequence. Inside, GPS overlays, forensic photos, fiber analysis, redacted customs logs, fabric tear magnification, the metadata from the Nikon, the final footprint, a screenshot of the unauthorized termination camera log, the 7-minute transmission, the rectangular scan cavity, the altered police report, the photo left in the envelope. He compressed the folder, encrypted it, uploaded it to 6 dark web mirrors, burying each in corners of whistleblower forums, time-locked to release in 5 years unless deactivated manually. Then he turned off the machine. 3 nights later, he received a voicemail from a number he didn't recognize. The voice was scrambled, run through modulation software. Still, the cadence was unmistakable. Stop looking. The salt keeps what it's given. Martin didn't reply. He printed the voicemail transcript. tucked it between pages of Clara's journal. By then, local police had quietly removed the final physical reference to her case. Forensic Anchor, a maintenance log from Skeleton Coast Ranger Station, showed a metal post removed for safety hazard. That post had marked Clara's final step. The log was signed by an officer who had retired 6 months earlier. The document was a forgery. No one investigated. At the Swakopmund Museum, a new exhibit opened Disappeared Travelers of the Namib. Clara's photo was not included. Martin visited once, then never again. He rented a shack on the southern outskirts, kept no phone, grew his own food. Sometimes at night, he walked. Not to forget, but to find the silence where she vanished. Once, during a windless dusk, he saw faint ridges in the saltpan, parallel, smooth, tire-wide. He followed them for a mile. They ended nowhere. And beside them, just once, he saw a fresh footprint. Heel clean, too partial. Then nothing. The world moved on. The case file of Clara Weiss, once open on 3 continents, now lay buried behind login portals and deactivated email addresses. Martin Weiss had ceased all formal communication. The German consulate, when contacted, described him as non-cooperative. In Windhoek, the Ministry of Justice issued a quiet closure statement, subject presumed deceased due to environmental exposure. Case archived under Article 78(3)(b). No mention of smuggling, no reference to photographic evidence, no listing of suppressed satellite data. Forensic Anchor, the Article 78(3)(b) clause was invoked in only 6 other disappearance cases, all from the same region, all marked by similar evidence gaps. The clause itself had no external review process. It closed a case indefinitely. Back in Swakopmund, the police storage room was cleared during an audit. Clara's case materials, tagged CW18NAM, were marked for destruction. Chain of custody forms listed each item, scarf, camera, notebook, GPS unit, map. All signed out for transfer. None ever arrived. Martin returned to the saltpan one last time. He walked without tools, without recording gear, no GPS, no compass, just the photograph in his hand, the one left in the envelope, showing the tarp-covered shape under satellite haze. He found the place again. The crust had hardened, the cavity no longer visible, but he remembered where it was. He sat beside it until night fell, watched the stars emerge sharp, motionless, unblinking. He lit a match, set fire to the photograph, watched it burn to ash, the last documented proof of what had been. And then he buried the ash in silence. 2 weeks later, a Belgian journalist named Ariane Leclerc arrived in Namibia. She had read fragments online, found data packets seeded across obscure forums. Half the links were dead. The others were corrupted or incomplete. But one video survived. Clara's voice. "I can't see them anymore." Ariane requested an interview with Martin. The request went unanswered. She visited his shack, found it locked. Inside a single wooden table, a green wool scarf folded neatly in the center. No signs of struggle, no indication of hasty departure. Just a room still, as if paused. Forensic Anchor, Ariane noted a faint footprint outside the door, the same pattern shown in police photos of Clara's final steps. Heel clean, too partial, pressed sharp into hardened dust. She looked up. The saltpan shimmered in the distance. That night, the wind returned. By morning, the print was gone. Years passed without resolution. The Skeleton Coast changed its skin with each season. Saltpans buckled and healed. Wind hollowed the dunes into new configurations. The wrecks rusted deeper into the sand. Tourists came and went, posing beside ship husks, unaware that somewhere beneath the crust, a step had ended and never resumed. Clara Weiss's name faded from systems first. Interpol removed her red notice quietly. Her name no longer triggered embassy protocols or local check-ins. At some point, even the missing persons boards in Swakopmund stopped listing her. A clerk deleted the entry during a database cleanup, citing low priority unresolved. Her voice, once looped in whispered fragments online, I can't see them anymore, was buried beneath layers of digital noise. Clips reposted by faceless accounts, their views dwindling to zero. In Windhoek, inside a quiet wing of the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the physical file labeled CW18NAM was sealed in an unnumbered drawer. The envelope, once thick, had thinned to a handful of documents, a reprint of the closure memorandum, citing environmental exposure under Article 78(3)(b, a satellite image of the saltpan, cropped wide, no markers visible, and a frequency log from a now decommissioned weather station, its body text redacted, with only the timestamp still legible. Someone had scribbled a pencil note on the back of the satellite image. The handwriting was jagged, interrupted. The words had been crossed out with 2 sharp lines. No signature, no initials. The photo was placed back in the file. The drawer was shut. Martin Weiss was last seen purchasing dry goods in Luderitz. His truck was found abandoned weeks later outside Aus, the windows clean, the tires intact. Inside was a folded page torn from Clara's journal. A single phrase was underlined twice. If they erase everything, leave the absence behind. No body was recovered. No missing person report was filed. A year later, a foreign journalist named Ariane Leclerc visited the region under a pseudonym. She had followed the broken trail Martin left behind through encrypted forums, ghosted blogs, and corrupted data packets. Most of what she found was already gone, but one recording remained intact. Clara's final voice note. Ariane stood at the edge of the saltpan where Clara's footprints had once ended. There was no jeep, no marker. The wind had flattened the land into clean white silence. She buried a small envelope beneath a stone cairn. Inside were 3 items, a fiber sample from the scarf, a printed transcript of Clara's final voice message, and a handwritten note. If silence is what you demand, then remember what you buried. She didn't speak of the trip afterward. Back in Swakopmund, an archivist cleaning out old display cases in the Municipal Museum found a sealed folder wedged behind a war-era topographical map. Inside was a single photograph, a close-up of a footprint. Heel crisp, toe partial, pressed deep into hardened salt. There was no caption, no attribution, no year. The photo was added to the Unsolved Traces exhibit. Visitors rarely paused before it. Those who did often moved on quickly, unsettled by something they couldn't name. But sometimes when the light hit at a slant, one could almost see what came after the footprint. Nothing. Only what the salt was willing to keep.